Dr. Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.
Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now.
Hello everybody, this is Mike here, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast with my very special co-host, Mr. Dorian Cook. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook at All Metal Mode, as well as All Metal Mode Podcast UK. All Metal Mode is every Monday and Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and All Metal Mode UK is every Thursday at 8 p.m. GMT time or 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We apologize for last night's show. Matt is still getting used to it. We figured out the issue, but it wasn't until about 8:30 last night, and so we just stopped it. We will do that again. We will do that exact same show. We'll get it going again real soon. Don't forget, you can find us on Spreaker. You can download from there. You can listen to it right off of Spreaker, but you can download it while you're on the go. To listen to it while you're on the go, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube at All Metal Mode, and of course there's a ton of different ways you can listen to it. You can even listen to it off of allmetalmode.com. Dirt Digest magazine, July issue is out now. Don't forget, it's a free online magazine. Check us out at dirtdigestmagazine.com. Keep in mind, we're always looking for articles. If you need help writing it, putting it together, you can reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you. We're also looking for good finds. If you made a good find or something you'd like to see, submit it to us. Go to the magazine. It's Treasure Room, I believe. And you can submit it and add a little short explanation of it, and we'll get it put up in the next issue. Please help spread the word about All Metal Mode podcast. Tell everybody, your friends, anybody into metal detecting, your grandma. We don't care. Just tell everybody. You can tell everybody. Thursday on All Metal Mode UK, we will be talking with somebody, I'm not sure who yet, from Air Metal Detectors. So that'll be really interesting. Of course, if you're a regular listener, you know we've had him here on the All Metal Mode podcast, and very, very interesting. So yeah, there you go. And tonight we're going to go right back into part two. Of course, last week was Amy. Amy was with us and asked a lot of good questions and had a lot of great input. And Dorian's back with us tonight. So Dorian had a lot to add, and I think I gave you some information that wasn't the best. Sometimes it's hard to think back. So Dorian's gonna help us out tonight. And he's got some stuff to add. So how's it going, Dorian?
Hey, yeah, it's going hot and humid. Probably about the same with you, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Hot and humid.
I've set up out on the front porch because the house is so hot tonight.
Oh, boy. Oh, did you get your air conditioning fixed?
Never had air conditioning here. You know, we're hillbillies living in the woods, and we have an attic fan, and the attic fan has gone out, and I have got a replacement, but it doesn't exactly fit the opening.
Oh no!
And I've got to do some carpentry work on it.
Oh boy!
But we'll get it going. Yeah, we'll get it going. As long as we can move air through the house, we can handle the heat here. But they say it's going to be brutal up here for the next 4 or 5 days here in northern Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are in Ohio and everywhere. You're talking over 100 degrees, right?
Well, they're talking about, with us here, we're actually in north central Kentucky. We're about 10 miles south of the Ohio River, which would be the border. And they're talking about maybe after tomorrow, we're going to get the remnants of that hurricane, and we're all a little bit apprehensive about that, because of the potential for flooding in our area. But the next 4 days after that, the temperature is going to be up in the mid to upper 90s, possibly breaching 100 by the fourth day.
Oh, goodness.
And our humidity has been hovering around, 98% up here. So it makes the air so full of water. Any activity that you try to do outside, your body can't get rid of the heat like it should because of all the moisture in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So all of you that are hunting are going to have to be very, very careful. And like I tell, anyone, if you start to chill while you're hunting, stop immediately. You are overheating if you feel a chill in this kind of weather.
No good, huh?
You need to get somewhere in air conditioning. You need to cool down because that chill is a warning that your body's heat elimination system is just overwhelmed. And from there, when you start the chills, you're not too far from a heat stroke, and that could be seriously injurious or even fatal, especially to older people.
Yeah. A little bit scary. I'm a little bit concerned about when you're going to have your attic fan in.
Well, I hope to do that project tomorrow morning before it heats up here.
I bet. Yeah, you better get that thing in. It's amazing to me what a good attic fan can do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so much cheaper than running, air conditioning, and I have bought back my freedom since I retired, so that I can do what I want to, pretty much any day. But there's a cost for that. I have to economize, and I have to be careful with my budget because I don't have my business anymore, so I don't have those funds coming in.
Right. Yeah, that is crazy. What else you been up to?
I've been researching some. What's been going on our Civil War relic hunters page. We're seeing still getting some great posts from the guys. I was talking with you earlier about that one picture that a man, one of our members, Ernie Dills, put up, and it is very likely the field desk of a very, very impressive Confederate general who's not generally known to Civil War buffs. His name was William Reed Scurry, and they named Scurry County, Texas, after him. But he did some very heroic things in the Civil War. He's the only Confederate general that is known to have picked up a rifle with a bayonet on it and charged over 1,000 Federal cavalry that were charging him and his unit. His men had panicked for the first time ever. They were seasoned veterans, and their line had never been broken. And they were at the Battle of Pleasant Hill, Louisiana. They'd been holding the center of the Confederate line, and the troops on their left and right had fallen back, and they hadn't noticed they'd been fighting so hard. And suddenly they were isolated on the middle of the battlefield. And here came well over 1,000 cavalrymen in blue are charging them, and his men panicked and started to run, many of them throwing down their rifles. And General Scurry and his officers couldn't stop the panic. So Scurry knew that his men would be ridden down and either all killed or captured. And so in desperation, he grabbed a rifle with a bayonet, let out a rebel yell, and went yelling and screaming right straight towards the enemy coming towards him. And two amazing things happened. His men saw their general running towards the enemy while they were running away, and it shamed them, and they stopped, and they returned and picked up their weapons and rallied around him. But in the process, before they caught up with him, the Federal cavalry was so amazed at seeing a Confederate general charging them alone, they reined in their horses to watch to see what would happen. And that bought the time for Scurry to form his men into a defensive posture, and they held off the Yankee cavalry for 20 minutes until the Confederate cavalry came and rescued him. So he saved like 3/4 to 80% of his unit from being killed. Tremendous heroic deed, and this brave man, this heroic general, was shot off his horse 2 weeks later at the Battle of Jenkins Ferry, Arkansas, and refused aid. He told his men to keep fighting, and he laid there in the 2 feet of muddy water because they were fighting in a flooded river bottom at the Jenkins Ferry. The Saline River had flooded, and he died, I think, the next day. And in the 70s, right there where he fell, a relic hunter found his gold watch with his name engraved on the back of it. And the hands were stopped at the time that he fell into the water. And I've hunted that very spot, and I've fired many balls all around where that occurred. So anyway, there's a little bit of a Civil War story, but we want to get into more information that will help people that are beginners or that are fairly new to the activity of metal detecting.
Yeah.
And I have a bit of a disadvantage in that I was not able to listen to the program last week. We had serious internet service problems, and finally got those solved today. So I apologize if I repeat something you guys have already covered. But let me say this, Mike, for the benefit of the people that are listening in who are far from being beginners. They're seasoned hunters. They've been doing it for years, maybe some for decades, almost certainly, I'm sure, some for decades. I don't think this will be totally boring to you because I'm going to throw in some stories and things I think you're going to love. We'll try to mix it up a little and help the beginners at the same time, give you a little food for thought for you. Mike, I'd like to start with telling you, my experience, how I began to teach people how to metal detect. Excuse me, Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure we hadn't lost the connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're good.
Yeah. I started out as a beginner in Dallas, Texas. I just started my own little landscape business, and we were living in one of the poorer neighborhoods of Dallas, East Dallas, place I think it's called Casa View, if I remember right. And we were renting a little 2-bedroom firm. And so, like everybody, I got out and I started hunting my yard. And I hunted it forwards and backwards, covered every square foot, backyard, front yard, in the small yard. And I found 38 coins, and I was amazed. I thought, this is really great. If I can dig 38 coins, in every yard I hunt, I'm going to find a lot of coins. And I was strictly thinking coins. I was far from, the time that I was still several years away from the time I would begin to think Civil War relics. Anyway, I branched out to hunting the school grounds and the parks and did well. And I probably had amassed about 100 hours on my little metal detector. I had a little Detex BFO. Was one of the first. I had one of the first discriminating BFOs. And it was really good. Maximum depth on like a quarter was probably 6 inches in the soils there anyway. But that it was still easy to find a lot of coins back then. So I came home from work one day and my house key had come off my key ring during the day somewhere. I lost it. And my wife had gone to the grocery store. And I thought, well, I've got about 100 hours on my machine. I'm going to get it out of the truck and see if I can't find another coin or two in this yard. Well, I got a real shock. In just 2 hours before my wife got home, I dug another 42 coins out of that yard in just 2 hours. It was like somebody had seeded the yard since I had hunted it, but they hadn't, of course. Right. It was the problem I had with being a beginner. I was not recognizing a great percentage of the signals, the deeper signals, because the signal was different. It was fainter, or maybe a little piece of iron or metal or something interfered a little bit with the signal. And that 100 hours that I'd put in parks and school grounds had made all the difference in the world in terms of learning my detector, learning its capabilities, learning its sounds, how it responded to different targets. And that was why I could go back. So one of the first lessons I would tell a beginner, when you get 100 solid hours of use on your metal detector, go back to the places where you first hunted, where you didn't find very much or find anything at all.
Right.
And give it another go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great point. Dorian, I want to stop you there. You made me come up. You made me think of something really good that I'd like to kind of talk about with you. You know,
all right.
You learned metal detecting and learned these detectors long before the internet. Now, the internet was available, I think, it was really obscure maybe when I started, but of course I didn't get into it years later, and I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And I mean, we're in this technology era where you can go buy a detector and you can find videos and everything else. But I think it hurts a lot of people. I think there's bad information out there. I think it makes people lazy. And I guess what I'm getting at, it blows my mind how many people that I think that I consider that are experienced, they've got a lot of hours, yet they don't know some of the most basic settings that almost all metal detectors share. And they buy one and they go, they go out to YouTube and all this is how so-and-so runs his, and they set it up and then they never change anything. They don't learn how to, you and I, we had to learn our detectors the hard way, and we had to learn them, and I'm having trouble here. Well, you had to go play with your settings and figure out what worked better. Now, I know you've got a lot more experience, but I mean, in that aspect, we were kind of in the same, we shared that we didn't have internet when we got started. What's your thought on that?
I don't know that was a bad thing. I really don't. I think honestly though, I made a mistake in that if I had a dealer who would have taken me out with them, taken me to the parks and the school grounds and using the same detector I was using, and if he'd just taken me out, say for a couple of 4-hour sessions, I honestly believe that it would have cut a year off my learning curve.
For sure.
And see, and let me explain something to your listeners about that. We, when I was the marketing director for Garrett, one of the first things I did, I went through our dealers and I fired every dealer that did not use a metal detector, like a coin shop. They just put them on the wall and sold them off the wall, and they couldn't tell you how to use them. They say, "Here's an instruction book." And I replaced 100, and we had 178 dealers when I took over. I fired all but about 60, and we started over, and we went to 400 dealers around the United States, all who not only used metal detectors, they had years and years of experience. Because what I discovered was that when you go out with a dealer who's experienced, as opposed to just buying your detector, from the local discounter, and you save X amount of dollars. That's great and wonderful. But I'm questioning, how much are you really saving if you're a beginner? Because if you pay that retail price, that dealer can afford to take the time. If you pay suggested retail and he won't take you out, you bought from the wrong dealer.
Mm-hmm.
You want a dealer that says before you put your money down, I will take you out, and we will go hunting together, and I will teach you, in the field. I will show you, because that's going to make a huge difference
Mm-hmm.
in your progress, the speed of your progress, the number of your finds, and you're going to avoid a lot of mistakes that beginners make. For example, Michael, let's address a very, very common mistake as an example. What we call the pendulum swing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, if a beginner, unless they might avoid this by watching a YouTube video. I understand that, but there's still going to be a lot of beginners that, if you look at their swing, it looks like the pendulum on a grandfather clock going back and forth.
Right.
They're coming off the ground on the left and the right sides. At the end of their swing, they may be 18 inches from the ground with their search coil. Mm-hmm. And they're only detecting a small area, maybe 18 to 24 inches right in front of them. And the rest of the time, their coil is so high above the ground in the pendulum swing that it's ineffective. They're wasting 2/3 of their energy of each sweep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
no, I agree.
We want to make sure, any beginners listening, that you don't have a pendulum sweep. The coil should be flat on the ground, barely skimming, touching the ground, and you should move in a 180 degree, half of a circle, starting at your right, with your, put your right arm straight out if you're right-handed. Put that coil on the ground, and then sweep all the way around as far as you can to the left until that coil is on the ground right by your left side. And then you've completed your sweep and come back. And of course, we know the basic stuff like overlapping, like mowing the lawn. You know how you have to overlap each cut?
Right.
You want to do that. And how much ground you're covering depends on the coil. Those of you that have the round concentric coils on your detectors, you have more or less a cone-shaped field going down in the ground. And right near the surface, like 2 inches, 95% of your coil is going to pick up that signal. But down deep, 8, 9, 10, 12 inches on a quarter, a little pinpoint area the size of a dime right at the end of your shaft is the only part of your coil that is detecting at that depth when you swing. So in other words, you're detecting only a 1-inch strip wide
at maximum depth. Yeah.
At maximum depth with a concentric coil. So in order to cover the ground, you have to advance forward only 1 inch at a time with your sweeps. Mm-hmm. This is why a lot of people miss coins, and why you could go back to the areas they hunted, because all they did was detect little strips out of that piece of land, and they may have not even detected 60-70% of it with their coils because of that design of the field. Mm-hmm. Now with a 2D coil, which is common on the new machines, about everybody's putting a 2D, you've got a better deal, because that field is like you've seen these metal plates that pizzas come on. Imagine cutting one of them in half, turning them on its side, and then lining it up, north and south with your coil, with the stem in front of the coil.
Right.
Well, that's the shape of your field. So down deep, you're getting a not, if you have an 8.5 by 11 coil, the field rounds, but it rounds much deeper, more gradually. So maybe, let's say, at 8 or 10 inches, you're getting a 6 to 8 inch strip of detection on those deep coins out of that 11-inch coil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but real quick, I can't completely explain it, but I can tell you from a lot of hours I prefer a concentric coil in heavy iron. I believe firmly that they both have their positive and negatives. Give me a concentric in the heavy iron, though. They've always just worked better in the heavy iron for me. So double Ds, they both have their place, and double Ds in a lot of cases are better. They're definitely, if you're in mineralized soil, they're better and stuff. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I know what you're saying, Mike, and I'd have to say I found 170,000 coins with a concentric coil.
Okay.
So. I'm not saying you can't. You certainly can't find coins with them, and there are places, like you said, where that pinpoint cone, more or less, will go through. It'll actually go between iron signals. But let me say this, Mike: if your iron signals are surface, like 1 to 2 inches, like as in the case of nails, square nails in a Civil War camp or something. Does the concentric work as well if the iron is shallow or if it's deeper?
Shallow, believe it or not. And I know exactly the difference between a concentric and a double D, and I've seen the images and stuff and the different cutouts. And why, Dorian, I don't know, because by all accounts, the double D should work better. I don't know why I do better with a concentric, but yeah, in the fields of Ohio, it's shallow iron.
Gotcha.
For the most part, I can't explain it. I don't. By all accounts, it should be a double D all day long, but the concentrics just do better for me. And other people have agreed with me who really can't like that, and I can't explain it. I don't know.
Well, but you do bring up a point, and that is if you're doing something that's working for you, it's probably a pretty good idea to stay with it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I also added 14,000 Civil War artifacts with concentric coils, too. But I will say this: recently, I was hunting it was a burned down Civil War field hospital site on the Perryville, Kentucky battlefield. It's called the Sam Bottom House, and it was one of the most important house locations on the battlefield. It not only caught a lot of bullets, a big 2-story log cabin, caught a lot of bullets and some shells from the battle, but then it was used for a field hospital for 3 months, and sometime after that it burned. And frankly, when we got the opportunity to hunt it, and I jumped at the opportunity, I thought, this is going to be great. They had to have left some plates in the ground there. And it was the most heavily iron trash site I'd ever seen in my life. And I was using a Garrett AT Pro, and I had it in zero mode, or as we would say, all metal mode. And I listened to iron, and I dug iron all day long, never dug one single non-ferrous target. Everything I dug was iron, junk iron. And finally, in desperation, about 30 minutes before I was about to give out, it was a hot day and all that, I thought, all right, I'm going to try coin mode. So I just silenced the iron and went to coin mode, and I dug 13 non-ferrous targets in a row in the same area that had been driving me crazy all day. And the 13th target was an eagle breastplate. So my very last target, I said, I'm going to dig one more target and I'm through, and that was the eagle breastplate.
Wow.
So that was an interesting experience with the 2D.
Yeah. I think it's what works for you, and I'm not saying I don't like double Ds. Don't take me wrong. I've had some really good double D coils and stuff, but when I get in those iron infested sites, I just prefer concentric. They've always done better for me, but and I think that's a good tale for the new people to the hobby. Figure out what works for you. What works for me in Ohio is probably not going to work for you in Virginia. And it depends on where you're at, the mineralization and everything else. I kind of want to backtrack here real quick. You'd mentioned dealers that'll take you out and show you and stuff. I can tell you from somebody who sells, rarely does anybody want me to take them out anymore. Now, when I was in Ohio and selling, and first started selling probably 10 years ago now, I would assume, don't quote me on that. Everybody wanted me to take them out, and I did. That was a really important part. That's how I was successful at it. But now with the YouTube and stuff, nobody wants that anymore. Now I'll figure it out. And on one hand, that's really good, that we have all this information. Unfortunately, there's so much misinformation, and unfortunately, so many people get on and they watch their favorite YouTube star and they see how they set their detector up for down in Virginia, and they're in Washington State, and it's not working out for them, and they fight. Well, John, big YouTube star, uses his like this. I'm not even putting down John, the YouTube star, but the new person doesn't. There's so much that a dealer could have taught him or her, and they just it's things have changed dramatically.
It's true, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, Mike. And see, there was a major shift. And again, the consumers were not really aware of what was happening. But being inside the detector industry, I was painfully aware of what was happening. We had a very, very big discounter who's now deceased, who came to my boss and basically said, if you will give me a 55% discount off of retail price, I will buy 1,000 detectors at a time from you. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an incredible order for a metal detector company back in the 70s.
Right.
And, the temptation, I understand. The problem was our dealers were only getting a 33% discount off of retail. Mm-hmm. And so that they had a 33% gross profit margin if they sold at retail, suggested retail. Mm-hmm. And that profit was what allowed them to spend the time with the person, because it's not fair to ask. I mean, if you were going to if you wanted to learn carpentry or you want to build a deck on your house, would you go to a deck builder that builds professional decks and ask him to spend 2 to 4 hours with you free to teach you how to build decks?
Right. No. Absolutely
no, of course not. Yeah, if you tell them let me give you an example. I was in landscape construction, and there was a lot of fancy concrete where they exposed real pretty gravels that they put in the concrete. So when it was done, it looked like gravel, but of course it was concrete. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy in Dallas who was known to be the best, and I wanted to know how to do that, how to do the kind of work that he did. So I went to him and I said, "Look, if you'll teach me how to do this pretty," they call it exposed aggregate concrete, "I'll work for you for free for 2 weeks. I'll work on your crews, helping you, pour your driveways and sidewalks and things." And he says, "You got a deal." And so I worked my rear end off for 2 weeks. And at the end of those 2 weeks, I knew how to do what he did. But it was a trade. It was a trade. See, he got something of value in return for giving me something of value.
Right. Right.
And then, so that's, people don't think about, this dealer needs to make a reasonable profit so he can continue being a dealer. Well, anyway, what happened was, in the industry back right at the end of the 70s, this big discounter is the one who started it all. He started advertising detectors cheaper than our dealers could buy them from the company. And just boom, within a matter of 2 weeks, I lost 300 top dealers. They were so angry and so upset because they could not compete. It wasn't a level playing field. They didn't stand a chance. There's no way they could match his discounts.
Mm-hmm. I know we're off the subject, but I also think it's something that somebody new to the hobby, it's worth hearing. And I'll tell you what's going on right now, Dorian. You've got Amazon, you've got Dick's, you've got Cabela's, you've got Walmart, all selling metal detectors now. these people think they've got YouTube and they turn to that, and and there's forums and there's social media and everything else, but there's so much bad information to wade through. There's very few people that really give sound advice from what I notice. And, and then to top all that off, not only is that our competition, we still, anybody can become a dealer. I mean, it's just, it is crazy. The dealers out there that don't metal detect, don't know anything about metal detectors. Of course I wouldn't, but I could name a handful of them right off the top of my head. Don't know the first thing about metal detecting. I've talked to them, and that's, I'm not blaming them, but why, the manufacturers, if you get good dealers that'll teach you how to use them, they're a phone call away, or they're, down the road from you, and they'll take you out and they'll show you, or they'll pick up the phone and help you. You keep people coming back to the hobby. How many people do they lose who buy one of these from Cabela's, buy something cheap, buy something, Amazon's got tons of Chinese knockoff stuff, and, they get into it and they think, well, if this is metal detecting, I don't want no part, and they can't find the information they want. And, I think it's part of the consumer's fault too. You got to understand you get what you pay for, and I don't care what you're getting into, you should do research. I had a guy, it's been over a year ago, contacted me wanting to get 2 water detectors, 2 scoops, 2 hand diggers, and 2 pinpointers. And, we're looking at several $100s to get into what he wanted to do, with good products, good sound products, not the most expensive. He told me he's getting started, and he couldn't believe it. Well, I can get exactly what I told you off of Amazon for $280. And, I tried to explain to him, the difference though, what you're getting for $280, you're throwing money away. And, so I didn't get the sale, and that's okay. But, I feel sorry for some of these people that really want to get into the hobby, and they just, take the time to research.
Good point, Mike. But see, you're actually getting into something that I really wanted to cover. I'm not going to cover it in too much detail, but I want to make this point. In fact, there'll be my first article in Dirt Digest will come out, I guess, next month. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be called The Old Pro's Corner. It'll be a regular column. And the first one I'm writing on is called the 80-20 Rule. And the reason why the discount detector sales thing through all these places, like you said, Cabela's and wherever, the reason why it makes initial sales and more than 50% of the sales that they make, those detectors get used an hour or two and go in the closet. Because success in metal detecting is 80% operator and 20% detector. You give me $100 detector and put me against a beginner with a $2,000 or $3,000 detector, and I promise you, I will walk off the field with 4 or 5 times as much fines as he has. Mm-hmm. Because that's how much success depends on the operator's experience and not on just a detector with all the bells and whistles.
Right. Again, I can't, Dorian, I mean, this is way off topic, but it amazes me how many people I just seen a post in the last week, maybe 2 weeks tops. A guy had a very, very simple detector. And I mean like an analog with, sensitivity disc. It only had 3 or 4 knobs, and he had no clue how to use it, and nobody in the room knew how to use it. And I thought, I didn't even respond because social media, it almost gets violent at times. But in my head, I just thought, how in the world do you guys not know how to use this? It's got disc, it's got sensitivity, it's, I don't, maybe it had gain, volume.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
For the sake of the beginners, let's go just a little bit farther and explain. When you say disc, you're talking discriminate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. You're discriminating out targets by turning the knob, and it just, I didn't go back to it, but I think at that point, like 7 or 8 people, 10 people had responded, and nobody knew how to use it. And I thought, guys, my goodness, this is as simple as it can be. How do you not know how the discrimination is going to affect that detector and the sensitivity and the volume? And you know what I mean? It was just like, wow, but I have people that have these detectors, and it's like, I get calls now and then, people know I use this, or I use this, or I've used that. And, I had one recently where somebody asked me, they were having trouble with their detector. They've had it for a number of years. And it blew my mind that they didn't know how to make this simple change that'll completely change that detector and how it works and fix this problem. But they had bought it. They YouTube or wherever they got their information, they set up their program, and that's all they ran. So, pretty shocking to me. Pretty shocking.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're kind of getting off the subject there. But
okay. Well, let's come back on. Let's talk about, when a person is brand new and they've just got their detector. Some of the mistakes they make, besides the pendulum swing, there's another mechanical mistake, I call it, or a physical mistake, if you please, that's common, and even some of the more experienced hunters fall into this trap. And I want to kind of alert everyone to make sure you're not doing this. We seem to have a number of beginners that will extend their shaft way too long, and this forces them to bend their arm at the elbow when they swing. And if you get out and hunt 6, 8, 10 hours a day, and you go, say, on a big detecting trip, and you do that for 3 or 4 or 5 days, you're going to end up with a very painful condition in your elbow joint. We call it detector elbow. I think it's a type of bursitis, and you don't have to be old to get that. And it can actually contribute later on in life to arthritic conditions if you make a habit of this. So be careful and make sure that your shaft is extended to the correct length, which is so that your arm is relaxed and it's basically straight when you swing to the left or the right. Not stiffly held, relaxed, but straight. And you're not bending that arm at the elbow, because the more you bend, the quicker you're going to have problems in that elbow.
Great advice, yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about where to hunt as a beginner. I'll tell you a story that happened to me when I was working at Garrett. True story. Had a young fellow come in, 18, and he was all excited about metal detecting. And so I'm trying to give him the basics to help him avoid some of the common mistakes. So I tell him, you don't want to start out hunting in a dump. You don't want to start out where you can see all kinds of visible metal trash. You want to try to get out into areas, hopefully that are mowed, so you can get your coil close to the ground, where there's been human activity or habitation. Better to hunt a house that is standing than one that is gone, because so many sites of the old houses that are gone, they left thousands of the nails that held those houses together in the ground. And it's much easier to hunt that yard if they're still in the house, if you know what I mean. Okay, so I'm giving this guy all these tips about, don't hunt a dump site. And so what does he do? he takes his detector, ignores my advice completely, goes to a local dump that occupied about 3 acres of weeds, on a 3-acre, empty lot with weeds about up to your knees. And right on the edge, as he starts in, he gets a signal in the ground, and he digs up an Army ammunition box with $12,000 in $12,000 in cash and 245 pistols in it.
Oh, that is funny.
Oh, well, anyway, so he comes back, and he wants to buy our most expensive detector. Okay, so he tells me he's going to go hunt gold coins. That he read about this house up in, I think it was Sherman, Texas, Mike, north of Dallas.
Okay.
Anyway, this house, apparently he's come across an old newspaper article that they dug up $20,000 in gold coins at this house, back in the 30s or 40s, somewhere in there. So I had told him avoid places like this because everybody and his brothers has read that story and has been there and torn the place apart looking for more coins. Well, again, he did not take my advice, and, maybe nobody that's listening to me tonight will ever take my advice again after they hear this, but I'll take the chance. This kid goes up there and literally finds $60,000 in gold coins. And that's where he didn't take my third piece of advice, and this time I got him. I told him, don't go publicizing, don't go out and go on a spending spree. Convert this money very, very slowly to cash as you need it. Well, he went out, bought his girlfriend a new car, and his parents, I think he bought them a new car, and he spent the money right and left, and it was less than 2 weeks he had an IRS man knocking on his door.
No good.
Nope.
That's
and from
no good.
At that point, he disappeared. I never saw him again, so he fled the area, so I don't know what happened to him.
Oh,
but
wow.
Anyway, it's really, if you can really avoid a lot of problems if you listen to people that have been there and done that, because people like you and I, even though we didn't have the internet and all these great internet stars, and let me make a comment. You were talking about these people that are so-called internet stars, YouTube stars. Mm-hmm. I watched a video of one of these stars telling people that Civil War percussion fused explosive shells are not dangerous, that they won't explode if you drop them on their nose, and that the black powder will hardly even burn. And nothing could be further from the truth. I was thinking to myself, this guy is going to get somebody killed. Mm-hmm. because percussion fuses are very unstable, and you don't know what's going on inside that shell. You don't know if that fuse almost blew when it hit the ground, and all it needs is another little tap. See? Mm-hmm. But this is the kind of thing, folks, you can run into on YouTube. I've watched guys dig coins from every place. I've watched the Russian, battlefield hunters. I've watched the English gold coin hoard hunters, and the guys that walk the Thames and do what they call mudlarking. I've watched them all, and I've seen incredible mistakes, and I've seen a lot of faking. A lot of these videos are utterly faked.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I see some stuff that I have to call fake.
These guys get a big following. They get advertisers. They make money, and that's what the bottom line is. Now, there are genuine, legitimate people, but I'm saying, be cautious. Don't just automatically assume because they're on YouTube that they're honest and upstanding and would never think of faking a find or making you think that they're a better hunter than they really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Something I've seen over and over and over again that just shows their lack of knowledge is digging up a silver coin and just going to town on it with their fingers. I wrote an article about it, rubbing the value away. It's a horrible thing to see, guys. If you're new to the hobby and you find a silver coin, you want to see what it is. You want to see what year it is and everything else. Don't do it. Take it, put it in a protective little thing, however you want to protect it. Take it home, soak it in a little bit of water, run water over it even. That's it. I've done enough years that I will dab, and I don't mean brush, I mean dab a Q-tip on it, gently, to lift that dirt out from underneath the letters and everything else, the reeded edge and all that. That's fine. You dab, you don't brush. You'll scratch it, and those if you found a valuable coin and you send that off, they're going to look at it under a microscope. So it might look fine to the naked eye, but as they see those fresh scratches, the price just goes down and down and down. And I see them do it. Some of these huge YouTube stars, they find it and just in their fingers, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I think getting into the hobby, it's important to learn how to do it and everything else, but it's also important to learn how to preserve and take care of the artifacts and coins you find. I think you have just as much responsibility in learning all that. So, but yeah, it's there's a group that I belong to. I really like it. The matter of fact, well, I'm not going to go there, but it'll all come out soon enough. A good thing. There's a guy that has a group called Arty Fakers Planners page. It's all about faked finds and stuff. And his reason behind it isn't to call people out and shame them. It's to educate people. To post pictures and post stuff on there, you got to take the name out of the original poster. But it's a place to question legitimacy of things. And to educate, and I made the joke the other day. There's so many people finding and posting clean, spotless buffalo nickels and V nickels and shield nickels and all that before long, we're going to start posting our crusty ones and people are going to call them fake. Of course I'm making a joke, but it's literally happening all over the place. Steel pennies that have never spent a minute in the ground. Arrowheads and artifacts like that. And his whole reasoning behind it is he said, Mike, there are people that are trying to make money off these fake arrowheads. There's people that have literally done fantasy pieces from the Civil War that never existed that are sitting in collections as legit, that people paid big money for. There's people that are trying to propel themselves in this hobby to be some kind of star off of fake finds. And he said it drives me. I love his reasoning behind it. And then, in that group, new people will come in and they'll, or somebody not real been in the hobby real long, and they'll post something. And if it's legit, and oftentimes it is, people will get in line and say, no, that's legit. And here's why. There's some very educated people in there. Now, don't get me wrong, the drama kind of gets going sometimes. You get the people that have been called out in there. You get people that, why hunt with him? He'd never fake that. Well, how do you explain a handful of V-nickels that look brand new? That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, good point. There's always going to be people that have a need either for greed or for ego. They have to be involved in that kind of thing, and that's sad.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, getting back on what we were talking about.
Sorry, Dorian.
That's all right. That's okay. It's an interesting thing how often a beginner will hit something really, really special. I saw it over and over again over the years, and I got to the point where I actually dreaded to take a beginner relic hunting with me because I knew, as sure as the day was long, they were going to make the best find of the day.
Right.
And it would happen over and over again. But I remember a fellow that was brought into the Garrett factory by his neighbor. The neighbor had been detecting for several years, and he was out in his backyard, and the guy kind of looked over the fence and saw his neighbor detecting and got talking with him about it. And he says, well, I'll take you over to the Garrett factory. He says, we'll get you set up. So basically, the neighbor didn't really help him too much. He just brought him in and dumped him on me. And since I had to handle what they call the lobby sales, people that walked in the factory and wanted to buy direct, so it was my job to sell him a metal detector and to give him some advice on how to use it. So, we spent a couple of hours, and I'm thinking, well, he's got the experienced guy to go out with here, and surely, he'll help him out. Well, they take off, and they go down to the old rich section of Dallas, and their big old mansion had been tore down, and the yard was still pretty much intact because it was a big yard, and there was a long sidewalk that led down to a couple steps down to the sidewalk that ran along the street. So the guy that was experienced didn't lift a finger to help him make sure he had his detector tuned properly or anything. He just took off and started hunting the yard. Well, here's this poor new guy. He's trying to remember everything I've told him about tuning his detector, and he finally thinks he's got it set. He's standing on the sidewalk down near where the two steps go down to the main sidewalk, and he just kind of tentatively sticks the coil out in the grass right beside the edge of the sidewalk, and just immediately gets a really big, strong signal on a non-ferrous target. So, it takes him a little while to pinpoint it, and then he digs it. And about 3 inches deep, right beside the sidewalk, was a heavy gold, 24-karat gold man's ring with a really nice star sapphire in it. $3,800 that ring appraised at it.
Wow.
And that was back in the 1970s.
Wow. That is crazy.
Very first thing that man ever dug in his life.
Well, I think a lot of beginners' luck is, we've been detecting forever. We know our detectors, and you're like, it's an iffy say. I think people new to the hobby tend to dig a lot more. And I think they just, I don't think it's luck as much as they hear that thing beep and they're ready to dig it. They don't care what it is, and I think that's where it comes from.
Well, the luck was just in the very first signal that he ever detected. He put his detector right down on top of that ring.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there is some luck. Oh, don't get me wrong. And but I also, I think a lot of people we know our detectors. We're like, that's really iffy. We've been at it a long time. It's like I don't want to bend down and dig another piece of junk. I know that's junk. And then somebody comes behind you, brand new to the hobby, and they don't care. They'll dig it all. Hey, my detector's going beep beep. I'll dig it. And I think a lot of it's from that beginner's luck.
That's true. One of the things that you have to consider is what I call I call it. I mean, I didn't invent it. I just wanted to talk about it. Actually, is the law of diminishing returns. Well, what is the law of diminishing returns? Well, it's on how you approach a site. For example, if you were to find an old house site that had never been hunted, and you just immediately started to find good coins, wheat pennies, silver dimes, silver quarters, and you're hitting them just every few minutes, sometimes maybe 2 to 5 minutes, and you've got another one, and you realize that you've got a really sweet site here. You don't want to dig every signal in all metal mode because things happen. How many permissions have I lost over the years unexpectedly, not because I did anything wrong, but because the property owner died or the property sold, a variety of reasons that you didn't expect to happen.
Sure.
And so if you've got this unworked site, and I mean, you've got that strong feeling that, wow, this is going to have a lot of stuff. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be gridded off and every square foot shouldn't be hunted carefully. What I'm saying is you should go through, set your discriminator up, hit your bigger non-ferrous targets, get your $50 and your quarters and your silver dimes, the ones that are near the surface, especially the easy recoveries. Get those out of there first. For one thing, you're getting them out of your way so that when you come back and work that ground for the deeper targets, they won't be masking signals of deeper targets.
Yes. Yep. I want to touch on this real quick. I mean, they're explaining it, but I think typing it, they're maybe not getting it correct. Somebody was talking about separation, and Jeff asked separation. Well, Jeff, what we're getting at is how well a target. How do we talk about separation? I had it and I lost it. To me, it's how quick does your detector recover from one target to the next? For example, I had a guy buy a detector off me years ago. We don't need to get into what it is. He brought his old detector, and he thought one of the big problems with that detector was it didn't do good with detecting targets that were close to each other. And for example, we took a nail and an average quarter, and we put them an inch away from each other. And every swing, both directions, it would pick up the nail, but it wouldn't pick up the quarter. So we put it out another inch. Well, it ended up being probably 4 or 5 inches out away from that quarter before it would hit both targets. So we took his new detector that he just bought off of me, and it would pick up that quarter or separate them with the nail sitting right next to it, and then with the nail sitting underneath it and the nail sitting on top of it. So its ability to separate those two targets and pick them both up is what we're talking about. You don't want a detector, you don't want to be in a field and a detector won't pick up a target from another one if it's 4 or 5 inches apart, unless it's 4 or 5 inches apart. You want something that can quickly recover from one target to the next. So hopefully that explains it better. Dorian, I am feeling sick to my stomach, and it's kind of getting worse and worse. I'm okay right now, but let's be thinking about wrapping it up. I feel like I could be getting sick here.
Okay.
My stomach's in knots, and
okay.
I apologize. I apologize.
Sure.
But we can always come back and do the third and fourth and all that on this topic if we want. So it's not like we got to rush through it. But is there anything else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to just real briefly for a minute or so here cover one thing for the beginners, especially for those of you that are new that might be listening. You'll do better in the evolution process of learning your detector and becoming more successful if you don't go immediately out to sites where your metal signals are really, really close together, like Mike is talking about, and separation is a big issue. Even if your detector is capable of separation, there will come a time before long in your detecting when you will be ready for that. I would suggest that you think about cutting your teeth on detecting and in yard sites. And I'll tell you, a great place to hunt that's always produced for me was practice football fields or even football fields at high schools and schools, any kind of sports practice field, because the signals are not jammed up on top of each other. Yes. Your signals might be 10, 20, 30 feet apart, and that allows you to really concentrate on individual recoveries. And after you get thoroughly used to doing those recoveries, you've learned how to pinpoint, that's going well for you. Then start thinking about working some sites that have targets closer together. Instead of 10, 30 feet apart, you want to try to find house sites and things where your signals are 5 or 6 feet apart. And then finally, you'll get down to the sites Mike's talking about, where you need the kind of separation because you got iron targets within inches of your good targets.
I believe last week I had said, I get a new metal detector and I go to the trashy park and I'm digging everything to figure out what it's. Okay, I got to back up a little bit. Dorian's absolutely right. I do that now. I didn't do that 20 years ago. Find some place like, like he said. Now, I wouldn't. Practice football field is great, especially if you've learned to dig holes properly. Make sure before you do any of this, you've learned how to recover targets out of the soil and dig a proper hole and all that. Some of the best places I learned from young was schools that were less than 20 years old. Football stadiums that were less than 20 years old, hunting around the bleachers and that kind of stuff. Go dig clad. I don't care if that's not what your intentions are in the beginning or what you want to find. Go learn off of that. Soccer fields, newer soccer fields. You don't want to, you can try it. But if you go to a soccer field that's in a park that's been there for 200 years, there's probably going to be a lot of trash and stuff, even where the soccer fields are. I really like the newer stuff to learn. Wouldn't you agree? For the most part.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to throw in there, Mike, because you're going to encounter these on those football fields and school grounds, especially where kids play rugged sports. You're going to find gold and silver chains. So for you new folks, be sure that you know what a gold or silver chain sounds like on your detector. Borrow one, or if you've got one, go out and bury it, a couple inches deep. Usually they're shallow, but they don't give you a regular coin signal. So listen for the chains, because I don't know about you, Mike, but I've encountered those on every school field that I've ever hunted. Mm-hmm. And also class rings. Class rings are lost continually. They can the local hunters can clean out the crop from last year, and this year they'll put a new crop in those fields.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Dorian, I disagree with you a little bit on something.
I'm brokenhearted.
Well, that's a good thing. Hey, we can talk and we can, from different experiences.
Sure.
Now, I'm with Dorian about a field site with a lot of iron, but if you can have somebody show you and you've got the right kind of detector for that, I think field sites where there's a lot of iron, but there's no modern trash is a great place to learn. Number one, you're not having to worry about digging beautiful plugs. You're going to get a lot of different signals because there's going to be little pieces of copper trash and different things, little buttons, coins, and everything else. I think it would be really hard to go into a site like that by yourself. But if you had somebody with a little bit of experience, for example, years ago, took a husband and wife out, and we were in his field where I'd overlaid and found a site, and we gave her a detector. She'd never swung a detector in her life. Told her what to listen for. I followed close. She hit a button. She hit another button. She hit an Indian head. Can you imagine those being your first finds? 1800s buttons and a Indian head. And once I showed her and explained it in probably 10 or 15 minutes, and I gave her a very simple detector, because you can use a very simple detector at a field site. It really was really neat to watch. And it's almost cheating, because you should really go out to a park and school and stuff like that and go dig clad and trash. But if you got somebody to show you a field site, you got the right kind of detector, you're gonna really have a lot of fun.
You are, yes. Mm-hmm. And listen, for another tip for the beginners, If you hunt with your buddies that are at the same level you are, you're not going to learn a lot from them. If you have the opportunity, try to hunt with people more experienced than yourself, and don't worry about the fact that they're finding more than you are. You're going to catch up to them, yeah, but watch them, talk to them, ask them questions, and learn everything you can from them, because that can propel you. One little tip they give you on a site, and the light bulb goes on in your head, and suddenly you have doubled or tripled your finds.
Yeah. Something Bill says, and I'm going to disagree with him real quick. He says, dig it all for the first 100 hours on a new machine. Bill, you're saying that from a lot of years of experience, and you're leaving some things out. There's literally people who will go out and dig up every single target. And what I would recommend if you're new, go dig every repeatable target. But once you dig up 20, 30 pull tabs and they all were the same number, and you're like, okay, this is going to be another pull tab. Okay, this is going to be another pull tab. This is going to be another pull tab. It's time to try to go after something better. Hey, this is a dime. Here's another dime. Now you know it. Good. And start whittling it down, because, where this is coming from, Bill, I've got a park down the road. You could probably put 100 hours in a 20 yards by 20 yard area, and you're going to dig so many pull tabs and aluminum chunks and stuff like that. I do agree with you to some extent, but I think because of your vast experience, you're not thinking back to, some newbie would literally read that like dig every single target, and come back with a handful or handfuls of iron. So I really recommend starting out listening for those repeatable targets if you're using a digital detector with really steady VDIs. I'm talking brand new. You just bought your detector. You've never been out. Try to weed through everything, figure out where a dime, quarter comes in, a penny, and kind of concentrate on those for a couple hours, just a couple hours, and then start opening up and then listening for other sounds and other signals, and then, work into digging everything that repeats it's not iron. And then once you get even a better hang of it and you start hearing all the, okay, you start knowing what's what. Okay, that's another pull tab. That's a pull tab. Okay, I've dug 100 of these, and they're the aluminum underneath the lids, all come in there. Then you can start discriminating stuff out a little bit. I think. Or do you disagree, Dorian?
No, I really don't. I think, Mike, you're talking about the law of diminishing returns again. See, it just comes down to, I would look. Let's say Bill and I go onto a site, and Bill says, "I'm going to dig everything, every signal I hear." Well, he decides to take the left side, and I take the right side, and maybe. The left side is it's an old house place, we'll say. And maybe the left side's where all the guys got together on Sunday with 3 or 4 cases of Bud Light. And, there's can slaw and there's pull tabs everywhere on that left side.
Yeah.
And while Bill's digging every one of those pull tabs and pieces of can slaw, I'm over here on the right side where they didn't have their drinking parties. And I'm popping the usual coins out of the yard. I would have to think at the end of the day that, I'm going to certainly have a bigger quantity of coins and jewelry than Bill is, because I've dug far less junk signals, because I'm hunting and discriminate, and he's digging everything. Yeah. I don't see it. Now he might get a gold coin, or he might get a deep coin that I missed that might be the best find of the day. So I would say Bill might have the best find of the day, and I'm probably going to have the quantity, you see.
Yeah.
So the question is, let's say we only have a 1-day permission. Do I really want to dig every piece of iron or junk on a one-day permission when I know I can't cover this whole house site in one day?
Mm-hmm.
No, I want to, we call it cherry picking. I want to cherry pick that site, and I want to hit the easy and good finds. If I've only got one day, I want to cover as much ground as possible. And I know I'm going to walk off and leave deeper coins, but if I ever have the opportunity to hunt it again, then I'll come back and I'll work on the deep coins. But let's get the shallow stuff off. So look and say, okay, am I going to have permission on this site? Is it likely that I'll be able to come back here week after week and work on this? Or as the lady said, well, I'll let you hunt this one time. See, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, as we're having this conversation, I'm realizing we all have our own advice, because if I have permission for one day, I'm going to dig some of the shallower targets. If they're clad, I'm going to go for the deeper and deeper and deeper, because I want the best. I don't care about quantity. I don't care about clad coins. But, it all comes down to the site, really. I mean...
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you make an excellent point there, Mike. I didn't clarify the fact that this was an old site, or I wasn't even thinking about that on the clad coins. You've got an excellent point. Mm-hmm. You would want to try to get some of those deeper signals. But
it just depends. It really does. And I think me, you, and Bill, if we were all to hunt together, we would probably approach a site the same way, and we would probably sit here and tell each other, for this site, we would all tell each other this, agree on how to have somebody new approach it. But we're kind of talking in real general terms. And in my, I realized as I was talking about certain sites, I had a specific site in mind. Well, the listener or you or Bill might not have the same thing in their head.
You know what, Mike? You just given me an idea. How about, Bill, I'm sure Bill's listening, okay? How about if you and I and Bill at some point went out, found a site, and all three of us worked it. We're all working a little different techniques, and let's see what happens in a day's hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would make it. Yeah, and then we could come back and share it with the listeners, and see what we learned and what happened and how our different styles of hunting worked out.
Yeah, Mike made just a wonderful point. Sometimes I don't like inviting some people to one of my sites because they usually cherry pick. I think this is a great conversation, even though I'm sick, I should get off here. Let's kind of wrap it up here. I feel like I'm going to get sick. If you get invited to a place, don't cherry pick. It's a great way to not get invited to return. But I'll tell you what, you're probably going to do better if you find us hotspot and grid it anyhow. Stay in your area, be respectful. If you go in there running around like a madman trying to cherry pick, you're not getting invited back by me. I just don't like that. You pick your area, I'll pick my area. You stay on your side. When you're done, I'm done. If you want to switch sides, that's fine. But if I'm walking back and forth, and you're cutting me off and everything else, running around like a mad person because you're wanting to find that good stuff, we're not going to get along well. Dorian, I got a feeling with that laugh, that person, you're going to go in there and you're just going to rip-roar through there, aren't you?
No. I was thinking back to, Mike, I actually was thinking back to my first hunt with Dennis Wynn. Poor old Dennis was so worried about, I took him on his first Civil War relic hunt, and your listening audience is going to meet Dennis here, I guess, shortly. He's going to be on the program. He's a great guy, and he's a very accomplished hunter. In fact, he's more accomplished on cache hunting than I am, for sure. But at the time, he was green as a gourd, and I took him on his first relic hunt. And he was so worried that I knew where everything was buried, where the good stuff was. If I started in a certain direction, boy, in about a minute or two, there he would be cutting my trail right across in front of me. if I could turn around and go the other way, there he would be right cutting my trail again. And it was a funny thing because I finally kind of chewed him out for it, and he looked kind of shocked and surprised. And I said, Dennis, we got 300 acres of battlefield here. Don't you think that we could keep 50 feet apart while we're hunting?
Right.
So
Right.
you remind me of that. Like I said, but I'm not putting Dennis down. He's a great guy, great hunter, and he'll make a great guest for the show.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Dorian, let's wrap it up. My
Alrighty.
stomach's a hot mess. I apologize, listeners, but we'll do this again. You know how we both like to ramble real good and tell good stories, so we'll come back with part 3, I'm sure, and probably more.
All
Probably
right.
more. Dorian, thank you so much
Yep.
for joining me tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Good
all the
night.
listeners. Good night. Well, there you have it, everybody. I'm sorry. I just don't feel good. On Facebook, We Dig the Civil War Headquarters. That's Dorian's site. Great site. There are some really fascinating conversations going on. Zero Discrimination on Facebook, and there's also, of course, our YouTube channel, Girls Rock Metal Detecting, same thing. Ohio Relic Hunting, and Dirt Pirates Detecting. So there you have it, and thank you all for tuning in, and have a good night.